My name is Pamela Zúñiga. I'm a teacher by training, and I coordinate the school coexistence program. And I greet everyone who's joined this conference and thank you for coming. This topic today that we are addressing together has to do with early prevention of violence and crime. Why and how? So, to connect to this, the aim of this presentation is early prevention, strengthening the protective role of schools through school coexistence. Now, let me share the screen.
Ahí sí. Listo. Vamos a continuar entonces. Bueno,
So,
para iniciar, para hablar de Paz Educa, en primer
to
lugar.
speak of Paz Educa, let me first give you a short summary of our history. And for this, I'd like to highlight the first event in 2004 related to the first survey in Chile on violence in schools. And the results show that 1 in 4 children suffered some sort of violence at school. So this diagnosis clearly showed that we needed a public policy for this. Until then, this was not worked on. School coexistence or promoting school coexistence. We had no strategy. So in 2005, the foundation devised a new area of work, considering this data, related specifically to education. So now let me review the programs that we had in the country and others that were existed outside the country to see if we could use some of this. Now, in 2005, the researchers heard of the Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Program, carried out in 1992 by researchers at the Institute for Studies of Violent Behavior in US. And this program had assessments that showed the participatory work that had been done and promoting behavior based on shared values related to the mission of the school. And so this has to do with what we have in our country, which is a similar institute. And so this program needed a positive atmosphere between students and teachers. So in 2005, we have the Paz Educa education project based on this previous model. Implementation lasted 3 years and sought to establish a new model for school coexistence and reduce violence and turn around these figures that were being shown by the surveys. So, regarding the history and the main outcomes of these 15 years of the Paz Educa program, as I had said, in 2005 the program was formed, but by 2007 there was a first assessment, and the results showed a 34.7% reduction of violent incidents among students. Another important milestone was in 2012 when there was a second assessment, and here the results showed a reduction of 15% in reports of violence among parents and school children. Psychological violence was identified, but there was an improvement in the school atmosphere. The third milestone, the assessment done in 2015, which was for a larger group of schools, 13 in all, and at those schools where the program was implemented, the figures that witnessed violence remained stable, whereas in the control group they increased. So therefore, what was concluded through this assessment is that the program was effective and kept the situation stable in general, and in general avoided the indicator from rising. And then In 2018, we had another assessment, the last one done, which was focused on one of the pillars of the program, which is the training discipline. Has to do with clear rules, good proper treatment, and positive behavior with students. We saw that there was a 26% reduction of minor offenses and a 36.7% reduction of grave misconduct. And so, considering these four assessments, we realized that there was an improvement in the levels of school coexistence based on the program interventions, as also it stabilized other indicators that we're working on in terms of the Paz Educa intervention. Well, that in terms of the most important outcomes. But today we're also working in schools. Today, we're in 6 schools in 2 districts of the metropolitan region, Peñalolén and Quilicura, and we're advising management teams and teachers, a total 539 direct beneficiaries, and also more than 5,200 indirect beneficiaries, these students at these schools. What else are we doing? Well, we're working in parallel with and based on the experience that what we've done, and we have devised a course called School Coexistence, which is carried out together with the Ministry of Education and the Educar Chile program. The purpose is to improve knowledge on managing the school atmosphere and coexistence. This is an experience of working with 2,000 schools, and today we have more than 600 schools that have been trained in this. Now, what is the Paz Educa School Coexistence Management System? This shows how we're working on the model. We see a whirlwind at the second, and below you have management support. This is the way of doing things in terms of the organization of the school, and that are key to achieving school coexistence. So here, this has leaderships, participatory management, and networking, among others. And around this, we have the pillars, the training discipline pillar, and in turn has other components that are worked on in terms of actions at schools. We have a plan for teaching the expected behaviors, a system of recognition, and a handbook for school coexistence. And also we strengthen positive ties between teachers and students. And the lower part, another important pillar, is the information system pillar. This includes data, records, and analysis in order to make decisions in terms of school coexistence. And the upper left, we have the situational prevention pillar, which improves on physical and situational conditions, active supervision of common areas. And lastly, in the lower left, we have focused prevention pillar when we work on selective prevention strategies and individual prevention strategies. The program also has 5 guiding principles. The first has to do with prevention, and this includes prevention strategies that are universal and that work with all students at the schools and the community. And this is done by strengthening behaviors and ties between students and adults, and also supervision of key areas in the school. And we see that where there can be conflicts, and at given times, these scale up and turn into violence. The other level has to do with selective prevention. This has to do with students that are higher risk of being involved in violent situations. It could be groups or course groups, class groups, and also individual prevention. And here we work with the students and their families directly that have been involved in any type of violence or conflict. Another guiding principle has to do with the ecological model. Here we understand that school coexistence is a phenomenon that responds to the interaction of different subsystems that was explained in the previous presentation, that this has to do with individual work with the students, their families, the neighborhood. Well, all of these sectors, and each one entail different factors, protective and also risks. So we do manage work involving the students, the classes, classrooms, the families, the schools, the infrastructure, and so on. So this is the school model. At the center here, we have the training approach. This is learning as such. So we need practices that promote socio-affective development with students, with adults, and working with the students with regard to the behaviors that's expected of them and addressing behaviors that are not expected and that are learning opportunities. And the top, we have a very important principle that has to do with database decisions. And so we think that schools must have information and have a record of data that allows diagnosis and decide on what interventions are going to be carried out based on the data. And lastly, on the lower right, another principle, positive school culture. Here we have a picture of a work being done at one of the schools in Peñalolén. And so the positive school culture is promoted by ties and relations between teachers and students so that they can have better relationships with the students that favors learning and good coexistence in the classroom and at the school as a whole. Now, what are we doing today? Well, based on this experience, I would like to say that today we have lines of work. One has to do with advice and another that has to do with strengthening of knowledge. Now, in terms of the advice, the Paz Educa program, which is the original one that started in 2005, still stands today. We do provide advice to schools face to face, and it's the implementation takes 3 years. So what we do is we assess the implementation. And then in terms of the strengthening of knowledge, we have the school coexistence course in partnership with the Ministry of Education and Educar Chile. And this is a self-learning course online and is aimed at groups of teachers, management teams, and also has a tutorial online to support the work carried out. And this course lasts 14 weeks. And third, at the bottom, we are working on another line of advice related to the implementation of the program, but online. Well, of course, considering the current scenario, this lasts 8 months. Now, let me briefly explain about this advice and why do we consider it so relevant? Well, on account of the situation today and that it's important to reach different places in the country and abroad. So in this sense, we have devised by extracting the most relevant aspects of the program, consultancy at a distance, 8 months internationally to improve managing school coexistence from a training discipline approach, which is one of the most important tools in our program. We'd also like to say that in our experience with this program, and in order to design this consultant work at a distance, we see there are certain things that repeat school after school. And so we've identified 3 common needs. One, there's a weakness in support given to school coexistence, leadership, planning, assessment, participation, and networking. Another need that we've observed is that schools lack a training approach to the discipline, which means that discipline needs to be worked on. And the third thing that we consider a shortcoming is using data for school coexistence. So we have devised this online training by Paz Educa, and there are results that respond to these needs that we've identified. So we are hoping to see an improvement in the figures, and also that practices based on the approach of this discipline should improve, and that this will have better consequences and outcomes. So lastly, we're hoping that knowledge may improve, that knowledge may be strengthened based on using the data to have a proper diagnosis and therefore have effective interventions on school coexistence. Before ending, well, I do have a couple of seconds left, but I would leave you with a couple of very relevant ideas in terms of the work that we do at these schools. In this sense, point out that as a foundation, we recognize the relevance of carrying out preventive action and that can be carried out at schools. And so strengthening the protective role that schools need. And so the work that we can do in terms of school coexistence and contributions are essential to promote protective relationships, strengthening coexistence, and dispute settlement that cannot always be addressed on time. So we need to be able to identify risk factors to be able to intervene earlier on. And so based on the scenario today, especially as schools today face major challenges, and within the pandemic, we see that relationships, interactions in virtual spaces and also face-to-face are a challenge in terms of how to work on them. And so here we can contribute based on the school coexistence management. This is preventive, and of course the call is to work collaboratively among all teams in society. So I would like to leave you with those two important ideas. And should you like to know more and elaborate on what we're doing with in terms of school coexistence, this is our website, www.pazeduca.cl, and please visit us and find out more about what we're doing. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.